express permission of the producers. We ask you also to please take this moment to turn off your mobile devices or to put them on vibrate mode. Thank you, and please enjoy the presentation.
We are live at the Frank Collymore Hall in our nation's historic capital city of Bridgetown. A very warm welcome to our audience on CBC TV 8, CBC Radio Q100.7 FM, the social media channels of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation and the Government Information Service, and the Prime Minister's Office in Barbados. This is our coverage of the Constitutional Reform Commission's public meeting. I'm Rashid Best. Thanks for joining us. The Constitutional Reform Commission was established in June of 2022 to examine the current constitution, engage with the public and the diaspora, and to report on the recommendations of the Commission. After the completion of its work, the Commission presented the report to Her Excellency the President of Barbados and the Cabinet of Barbados. This evening's meeting is another step in the reformation of governance in Barbados. Our people have an opportunity to engage the Commission and discuss the findings and the recommendations in the report. Chairman of the Commission, the Most Honourable Justice Christopher Blackman, will make a presentation on the report to the public, after which Barbadians will engage. The Master of Ceremonies is former Secretary to the Commission, Professor Barrow Giles. Over to you, Professor.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished dignitaries, dedicated members of civil society, citizens here and abroad, and our valued online audience, commissioners, and I would ask the commissioners who are present to please stand. Thank you. And members of the head table, and of course the chairman of the CRC, the Most Honourable Justice Christopher Blackman. It is my honor to welcome you to this important session on constitutional reform in Barbados. As you may be well aware, participatory constitutionalism is a critical element of constitutional reform, and the CRC was the beneficiary of the exchange of ideas from the public. Indeed, the report, with its recommendations, represents, in part, a collective endeavor whose singular purpose was to design a course towards a more robust, representative, transparent, and accountable democratic future for Barbados. Is the final outcome perfect? I would say no. Nothing is, in fact, perfect in my view. This evening, we are gathered to reflect on the recommendations of the Commission. Many of these recommendations are designed to ensure that institutions are not simply functional, but are just. They represent, in part, the collective endeavor to empower citizens working together to safeguard Barbadian democracy into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the chair to you, and of course, to thank you for joining us this evening. Many of you here and online are already familiar and well acquainted with the esteemed chairman of the CRC. However, as I indicated, it is my honor and privilege as chair of this evening's event to formally introduce the chairman, who will be presenting to the public the main findings and recommendations of the commission, which is a culmination of 2 years of hard labor. And before proceeding, let me do what I did not do, and that is to, of course, introduce myself. I am Cynthia Barrow-Giles. The Most Honourable Retired Justice Christopher Blackman is a distinguished figure who has dedicated an incredible 40 years of his life to public service. His unwavering commitment and tireless efforts in various capacities across the region have left an indelible mark on our communities. He brings with him a wealth of experience, having served in numerous capacities. Retired Justice, the Most Honourable Christopher Blackman, a Barbadian national, is a retired Justice of Appeal of the Bahamas and of Belize. Prior to joining the appellate bench of the Bahamas in 2008, Justice Blackman served as a High Court judge both in Belize and Barbados between 2001 and 2008. He was appointed chairman of the CARICOM Competition Commission in July 2018 and served in that office until December 2024. In August 2018, he was appointed chairman of the Employment Rights Tribunal of Barbados. He resigned that appointment on March 31st, 2023. Since May 2029, Justice Blackman has been a member of the Judicial Appointments Committee, the body responsible for advertising, interviewing, and recommending the appointment of the Chief Justice, Justices of Appeal, and judges of the High Court. In the 2000 Barbados Independence Honors List, he was awarded the Gold Crown of Merit for Law and Public Service, and in 2024, he was recognized for his distinguished judicial career as a Justice of Appeal and High Court judge. His distinguished, extraordinary, and, quote, exemplary service to Barbados and his exceptional leadership, end of quote, of the Constitutional Reform Commission, and awarded with the highest national order, that of Order of Freedom of Barbados. In relation to today's events, on the 20th of June 2022, he was sworn in as chairman and commissioner of the Constitutional Reform Commission of Barbados. And of course, as chair of that, chairman of the commission. As you all know, that is the body that was charged with framing the Constitution of Barbados, following Barbados' transition to the Republic on the 30th of November 2021. Please join me in welcoming very warmly the chairman as he takes the stage to share with us the CRC's contributions to constitutionalism and the vision for the future by highlighting the key findings and recommendations of the Commission. Following his presentation, we will take comments and questions from the audience, both here and online.
The Most Honourable Reginald Farley, the President of the Senate of Barbados, members, Mr. Justice Graves, fellow commissioners, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, both here and abroad, good evening. Professor Barrow-Giles, moderator and chair of these proceedings, my sincere thanks to you for so readily agreeing to chair this evening's proceedings and for your generous introduction, which went beyond the brief that you were shared. A very warm welcome to all present, both in person and virtually. And a very special thank you to Dr. Kevin Greenidge, Governor of the Central Bank of Barbados, and the management of the Frank Collymore Hall for making the hall available for this occasion and on very gracious and generous terms. I also take this opportunity to thank all those who contributed to the deliberations of the Constitutional Reform Commission over the past 2 years, either by way of written submissions or by attendance at the meeting cell. On behalf of all my commissioners, I wish you all a joyful, healthy, and blessed 2025. Commissioner Redmond has asked me to apologize for probably late attendance, but she hopes to be here before the end of the proceedings, and I believe other commissioners are joining us online. I was directed by the Cabinet of Barbados to convene this public meeting to formally present the report and the draft Constitution of Barbados Bill 2024, as submitted by the CRC to Her Excellency the President of Barbados on Monday, September 30, 2024. As you may recall, the Commission was sworn on June 20, 2022, and had its inaugural launch on June 24, 2022. The warrant of appointment stipulated that the report be submitted within 15 months. However, for reasons detailed in the letter of transmittal to Her Excellency, 3 extensions were required. The terms of reference of the CRC inter alia were as follows: to examine, consider, and inquire into the Constitution of Barbados and all other related laws or matters with a view to the development and enactment of a new Constitution for Barbados, report in writing after due examination, study, and inquiry, giving its opinions and making recommendations, and providing for consideration, a draft constitution for Barbados that, in its opinion, is necessary and desirable and meet the circumstances of a 21st century Barbados and promote the peace, order, and good governance of Barbados, and consider and make recommendations on all other matters which, in their opinion, were relevant to the attainment of the above aims and objectives. The CRC was also mandated to consult widely with the citizens and organizations of Barbados, whether in Barbados or abroad, in such manner and by such procedures as it considered reasonable and appropriate, receive and examine proposals from the general public, prepare and disseminate such material as may be relevant to widen public knowledge of and interest in the Constitution, and that a draft Constitution would be prepared, and generate public interest in the subject of constitutional reform by means of meetings and media programs, both in person and virtually, and by means of materials, whether digital or otherwise. In this connection, the Commission was very well served and assisted by the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, International IDEA, who provided the CRC with a number of primers on topics such as judicial appointments and judicial tenure, fourth branch institutions, electoral reform, including material on the registration of political parties and campaign contributions. The IDEA also sponsored the visit and lecture given by Dr. Sumit Bisar in December 2022, as well as the workshop for leaders in civil society at the Sagicor School of Business at Cave Hill. I wish to publicly acknowledge the contribution of a number of persons whose efforts made a qualitative and valuable difference to the successful completion of the work of the Commission. Commissioner Kahil Kathiwalda, who is now a student in Trinidad and Tobago at the Hugh Wooden Law School, was particularly valuable for his research skills, drafting a numerous memoranda, particularly in relation to the chapter on the fundamental rights and freedoms, on citizenship, the collating of several public submissions in a fashion that enabled us to relate thereto to the relevant parts of the Constitution. We are also deeply indebted to Commissioner Shade Jimmet, who is online, for her communication skills and knowledge of what I describe as the arcane modalities of social media and the several platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, and YouTube, which enable the Commission to meet the younger demographics of our community, and who, with the Subcommittee on Public Education and Engagement, created the pocket guide on recognition of the CRC, some of which are now in your possession. We are also deeply indebted to our moderator and Secretary of the Commission, Professor Cynthia Barra-Jazz, for her diligent and conscientious work in drafting the report, in seeking to capture the oft-times contentious contribution of members, and from the depths of our scholarship and wide-ranging relationships, considerably assisted the Commission in identifying valuable and beneficial relationships such as the International IDEA and a noted scholar of constitutional law, Professor Richard Alpert. The Honourable Sherman Moore, retired Justice of Appeal and former Chief Parliamentary Counsel, and Ms. Gabrielle Whitehall, Acting Parliamentary Counsel, for their conscientious and diligent work in ensuring that the draft instructions of the Commission were suitably reflected in the draft Constitution of Barbados Bill. Professor Tracy Robinson of the University of the West Indies for her in-house training session with the Commission early in its creation. The United Nations Development Programme Office for their keen interest and assistance in providing material on human rights issues, and organizing a regional conference in June 23 on constitutional reform and related issues. Professor Velma Newton, Director of the Impact Justice Program, and Ms. Michelle Gibson, Coordinator of the Canadian High Commission, for the significant financial assistance to enable the Commission to visit the Barbadian diaspora in the United Kingdom and North America. And finally, Ms. Gail Atkins, Director General Governance, and Ms. Linda Eiffel, Executive Secretary, Office of the Director General Governance, with the occasional assistance of Ms. Pamela Agard, then Administrative Officer to Office of the Prime Minister, who bore the task of supporting the work of the Commission for the 27 months of existence. When I reflect on the staff structure afforded to the commissions that were running parallel at this time in Trinidad and Jamaica, whose had staff numbers almost bordering into double digits, and what we had to go with, I say without question, the public of Barbados owe them a great deal of debt. And this evening, I wish to publicly thank them for the several courtesies and kindnesses shown to the Commission through its existence. In carrying out its remit, the CRC employed varied communication strategies, both conventional and current, to interact with audiences both locally and abroad. These included, but were not limited to the following, as I said: public hearings in the form of town hall meetings, which sought to receive oral submissions and gather the views of locals of the diaspora in England, the United States, and Canada. Creation of a dedicated website which provided inter alia information on the Constitution of Barbados, as it was at the end of June 2022. A summary of the submissions made by topic, made by members of the public, as well as the various activities carried out by the Commission. Issuing an invitation to the public to contribute to the process by way of sending submissions by regular mail via the CRC's email address or the template provided on the CRC's website. Conducting private meetings with key stakeholders, including civil society organizations who were invited to make submissions on matters of constitutional significance, and having meetings with the President of Barbados, the Prime Minister and the Cabinet of Barbados, the leader of the opposition, the former Prime Minister of Barbados, the late Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford, members of the Judiciary, members of both chambers of Parliament, the Commissioner of Police and senior officers of the Barbados Police Service, the Chief of Staff and senior officers of the Barbados Defence Force, representatives of both political parties, the BLP and the DLP, the trade union movement, senior, serving and retired public officers, to name but a few. The matters considered by the CRC came mainly from submissions by the public and stakeholder groups and members of the diaspora. In addition, consideration was also given to constitutional arrangements in other jurisdictions and constitutional scholarship. Just under a year ago, the CRC and the Barbadian community at large were the beneficiaries of a riveting lecture given by Professor Richard Albert on the topic, the grenade, the hourglass, and the sundial, and which provided solutions to consider for alteration and amendment to the Constitution. Some of the matters reflected on by the CRC were revising the preamble of the Constitution to better reflect a Republican Barbados, and the Commission therefore deemed it necessary to acknowledge and incorporate, where relevant, the concerns and views of previous commissions, as well as the 2021 Charter of Barbados, expanding access to citizenship while preserving the Barbadian identity, protecting and guaranteeing additional fundamental rights and freedoms to all persons in Barbados, as set down in the Bill of Rights, and that the fundamental rights and freedoms shall apply to and bind all persons in society, and not only the state. This concept, known as the horizontal application of rights, has been recommended for inclusion in the Constitution, and I commend paragraphs 3.79 to 3.88 of the report to you in that regard. The role of the Office of President in the government of Barbados as a parliamentary republic, and the continued role of the President in the legislative process. In this regard, there is a recommendation that the President will no longer be required to assent to legislation, and that is detailed in the process which is explained. Institutions and offices that provide independent regulatory and oversight functions, such as the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, Human Rights Commissions, the Office of the Auditor General, the Integrity Commission, and the Ombudsman. And in this regard, the Commission strongly recommends that in each of these institutions, that they be fully and properly staffed and outfitted to enable them to function effectively. In this regard, particularly, we wish to stress that the several service commissions should be fully operationalized and given their secretariat and not limp along as they currently do. Moreover, we are asking that the Public Service Appeal Board, which has been lingering on the statute books for a while, be operationalized and be given the equipment to do its function. As I have said in a bit of the remarks I prepared, which I'm probably going to excise, we do not want these institutions and bodies to be what I call trophy institutions, where you just tick a box and say you've had it, but then they don't give them the tools to do the work. We wish to recommend strengthening the financial accountability of the state, as well as the Office of the Auditor General. And we make recommendations for altering the Constitution and arrangements for the periodic review of the Constitution. A summary of the recommendations made by the Commission may be found in Chapter 12 of the report, pages 261 to 300, and the pocket guide which summarize the key recommendations, and I commend them to you for your consideration. The dissenting opinions prepared by several members of the Commission on a variety of matters, including the Office of the President, the Judiciary, and the Constitutional Office Commission, are set out in Appendix A, pages 301 to 324 of the report. These are also commended to you for your consideration. Those relating to the Judiciary and the Constitutional Office Commission shall be studied carefully. I have been urged to go into a greater detail on a number of issues. I, however, have preferred to give you adequate time for comments and discussion. But I would like to suggest that this evening's discussion shall not be the last of its kind. Whatever and whenever the parliamentary process form may take, to which I shall shortly turn, I encourage and urge all Barbadians to consider the report of the CRC by its several chapters in their community meetings, men's fellowships, mothers' union, PTAs, fraternal organization, and groups like the Lions, Rotary clubs, Toastmasters, and indeed the university community. Seek out the community leaders in your society who will be knowledgeable in the explaining matters. There is a challenge in getting enough hard copies of the report out to all of you. The government printery has had to pause in its printing in order to accommodate printing also that of the Parliamentary Reform Commission's report. And however, I've been assured by the senior staff of the printery that there should be another print run available in the coming week. I must tell you that much as we would like to, we have no secretary or staff to distribute the reports to the stakeholders who made submissions. So therefore, I'm going to say, if you need like a copy, please listen to where they may be accessed. But I'll also share with you that it is not easy. I went to a government department a couple of days ago and asked, may I leave some of the pocket guide? And the senior public officer declined the request because she had to ask for instructions from her senior, a government department. So I say that government hard copies are being printed and be available shortly at government locations, such as the licensing authority, the post office, and private businesses who give their consent for the documents to be distributed on the premises. Again, a request to go to a public place, I was told that the request had to be referred to a marketing committee to consider whether that could be accommodated at Christmas time. It isn't easy to get things out in Barbados. And in that regard, I want to say a very grateful thank you for the management of a business house who willingly accepted that it could be picked up from their offices without any undue formality. And as you all know, the report is available on the Government Information Service website, and you can print what you want of it from there. We'll do our best to get it out as soon as possible, because there's really no indication how much interest there is in it. And I really didn't want to do a lot of copies because it's over 300 pages and it's costly to print. The question now, ladies and gentlemen, is what is next? This meeting is consequent to the direction of Cabinet of the 1st of November. However, you should be aware that the Constitutional Reforms Commission's warrant expired with the presentation of its report to Her Excellency the President on September 30th, 2024. Further, the Commission's terms were advisory only. Consequently, it's for the Cabinet to determine which recommendations are to be accepted, even where there is no dissenting opinion on a particular recommendation, and where there's a dissent, with what they will agree. There is the additional issue of the recommendations of the Parliamentary Reform Commission, whose remit was also advisory in nature. And I am not privy to any of their recommendations. It's for the Cabinet of Barbados, when they have harmonized the varying recommendations of the CRC and the PRC, that a draft constitution bill containing the provisions agreed upon by the Cabinet will be brought to Parliament for consideration. The constitutional bill will need to be passed by a 2/3 majority in both the House of Assembly, that is 20 members, and in the Senate, 14 senators, for the Constitution to be adopted. Any changes that are sought to be made after the draft bill is laid in Parliament will have to be done by members and senators in the appropriate chamber, and is therefore for you, the public of Barbados. If you have concerns that you find that you've identified in the process, to lobby your members of Parliament, lobby your senators, and make them know, become aware of those concerns. The Commission is dead. The Commission is functus. We can only be a very small conduit in terms of this evening's proceedings. The work to be done must be done by you in making representation to members of Parliament and members of the Senate, particularly the independent members of the Senate, whom the government must make sure they're on side if it's to pass. So make sure your voices are heard where these people are concerned. Finally, an observation. Since publication of the report, comments have appeared in the print media on issues such as the gender quota provision for appointment of senators, failure to provide term limits in relation to the office of the Prime Minister, among others, and that the report of the CRC was an exercise in the formalization of symbolism, causing the Commission to err on the side of timidity. I've taken note of the comments, but I'll also say that while there is some merit in a few of the observations, the Commission is being acutely aware of the experiences in neighboring countries that constitutional recommendations came to naught as a result of overzealous recommendations that had no regard, I repeat, no regard to the political reality of the society for which they were intended. Thank you for your attention, and the table will endeavor to answer your questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for those remarks. I will now open the session to comments and questions from the floor. If you could please identify yourself by name, and if you're representing an organization, I would appreciate if you also, so advise.
Good evening. My name is Kamal Mason. I'm the owner of Elder Seven's Snacks. I have 3 questions, 2 questions and a recommendation. Let me see the recommendation quickly first. I've said a long time that our national identification card needs to have a memory card attached to it so that matters like this, this pocketbook can be attached via the download on your ID so that you don't have the long, laborious, and tedious and process of trying to disseminate the information with the process thereby. And I think that that would be a good addition to our ID in the new constitution where you legislate it as such that I know everybody doesn't want to get the new ID card, but that new legislation can come about where it is mandatory because it is that important, because this is extremely vital, critical, and crucial. Okay, my first question has to do with the aspect of the new constitution, the new Republican constitution as it relates to the process of your means via you've been able to get the new constitution constitutionalized, and it has been done very well. And let me congratulate and let me thank you for that. It's really fantastic. I must commend you. It's great. However, as it relates to emergencies, as it relates to things like pandemics coming along, as it relates, we just had COVID, and they've been the new implementation of martial law and new emergencies that have come in the Constitution via the time and the process that you're actually updating the Constitution. So you have an emergency coming in an emergency. So my question is, what is being done for future events as the hurricanes evolve, as these man-made and natural disasters happen to us, and the Constitution needs to be updated by the basis of the new Republican Barbados, and Barbados itself being changed along with the Constitution, because you have to implement, you have to update the whole thing. In other words, you have to go through this cycle again, because something can hit us that hard that we're not, that yes, we are resilient, but that in the process of the reconvalescence of the healing, that you go through new recommendations that have to be made in order to the Constitution. And very quickly, my final question, as it relates to the updating of the national anthem. Now there's a part in it that says that there's been, over the past 300 years, the Lord has been the people's guide. It's coming up to 400 years. What recommendations, if any, have been made to stuff like the Royal Barbados Police Force becoming the Barbados Police Service and having to update its slogan and its logo, the decal, the flag, that kind of thing? Yeah, that kind of thing, based on our connection to the new Republican model and us becoming a new republic, to have to change by the alteration of the Constitution by the process thereby. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. In respect of the comment on the anthem and the like, there was a current committee dealing with national honors, national symbols and emblems, which is still to report. So we are still awaiting that recommendation. Whether the Barbados Police Service, however, changed its name on Republican Day, and there's no need for any further action where that is concerned. The Constitution already provides in Section 30 for matters for emergency, and this is essentially a carryover from existing provisions. Every Constitution provides for that, and these are already covered for in the draft bill in paragraphs 30 through 33, and what is required, and that it just can't happen, but whenever there's going to be a declaration of emergency, it has to be promulgated, published in the Official Gazette, and people be aware that there's an emergency and what is happening. Because also bear in mind that while the Constitution is the overarching feature, the ordinary domestic legislation in terms of the Public Service Health Act and matters of that kind have detailed provisions regulating what must be done in those eventualities. So I think you will find that on inquiry and examination, things are provided for. I think, Doctor, yes, another question?
Hi, my name is John Knox. I have tried to get a copy of the Constitution from a government site, current Constitution, and I cannot find it. So I'm going to use, I've got one from the OAS, and I'm going to use a couple of sections in there to show you my concerns. The one from the OAS on the internet, which would probably have been lodged there however many years ago, says in 74:1, there shall be a leader of the opposition. So you cannot get a parliament without a leader of the opposition. He or she has to appoint 2 opposition senators before the Senate can be seated, and the parliament can only exist after it has been seated. That's my understanding. The process by which the leader of the opposition is appointed is that the largest group in the House of Assembly, which opposes the government, appoints a leader. The leader then has to convince, or the Governor General at the time had to judge that this person was representing the largest group in the House of Assembly. My question is, if we have had 230 love results, there can be no opposition in the House of Assembly, so there can be no leader of the opposition. And if there is no leader of the opposition, there is no constitutional parliament. So my question is that the case?
The circumstances of 2018 were addressed by the Parliament of Barbados by an amendment to the Constitution in 2021, and it's 2021-22. Now, the Consolidated Constitution, which is the prevailing Constitution, as at the 30th of June 2022, just at the time after we were constituted, is the operative Constitution of Barbados, which came into which was that Republican Day. And then the provision is there for the issue on leader of the opposition, section 74, as you said. Now, you, Mr. Knox, have sought to opine on a matter on which I think the court gave a ruling, is under appeal, but subject to this being overruled or otherwise dealt with. There's a declaration of the court that the Parliament is fully constituted. And unless there is a reversal of that, I am bound by what I've read of the court's ruling. So, contrary to whatever view you may have, that's the current law.
Good evening to you, sir, and thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Fred Corbin, and I represent the people of Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. There are a couple of points that we have to address and we must bring to the attention of all of our audience who are watching us from overseas and around the world. And one of these, a number of these, must be highlighted with regard to the ability of Barbadians to be comfortable with regard to a constitution that has been put together in a time frame which is of merit, and it has some very good recommendations in it. And I would like to congratulate the members who contributed to this putting together of these particular instruments. Now, in paragraph 3.40.19.1, the freedom to hold opinions and to receive and communicate ideas and information without interference, and the freedom from interference with their correspondence or other means of communication. I want to thank the Commission and I want to thank the Constitutional Reform Committee for including that into the Constitution as a recommendation, simply because it places null and void the ridiculous cybercrime bill that is currently offending and is of disproportionate legality with regard to the Barbadian public. Not only is it unconstitutional, but it is an offense in itself with regard to the public of this country. The second point I want to bring up was the Commission very clearly outlined that there was going to be a government and a constitution of transparency. Again, this is an excellent point. This is fantastic with regard to going forward for the governance of this country into the future. And one of the most important things with regard to transparency is a government that is willing to sit down and listen to people who actually have experience and the ability to bring truth, knowledge, and education to the table. Unfortunately, this current administration has never done that. On the right to a safe and healthy environment, this particular point is extremely important for the public of this country. In 2019, the World Health Organization issued a declaration that the world was going to be facing a lethal respiratory pathogen that was going to be deliberately released around the world. That is their words, not ours. The World Health Organization then declared in 2020 a medical emergency of international concern, which had already been enshrined in the document of the International Health Regulations of 2005, which 196 countries signed. And upon the declaration of a medical emergency of international concern, the constitution of this country and 196 other countries were suspended. And martial law was declared by the Attorney General of this country. Medical martial law was declared by the Attorney General of this country, placing full responsibility of the government to introduce all of the ridiculous, unconstitutional COVID-19 protocols which disenfranchised the public of this country and destroyed the economy of this country. The Constitutional Reform Commission, after all of this work and invoking climate change and the vanguard of climate crisis, which is a narrative that has been proven to be false, once again, has omitted and left the door wide open for the exact same ability of the government to declare medical martial law once again. And why do I say that? Because the carryover of emergency powers has been untouched by the Commission. Another point with regard to the Commission raising with regard to population. The Prime Minister spoke about this. The Commission has raised it in their report that Barbados' population has declined. Well, let's ask ourselves the question, what is the leading cause of population decline in Barbados at this particular point in time? Well, let me tell you what it is. It's the deliberate implementation of biological warfare by biological weapon injections in the COVID-19 shots. And that is killing our people. 7,500 Barbadians are dead as a result of this. If you don't believe me, just state the statistics for yourself. You can do the international research. I do it all the time. And I plan to be a voice for this constitution to the public of the Caribbean region. And I made my first presentation just yesterday with regard to these points to the Caribbean region on your report. And I plan to do a report, and I continue to voice my opinions as well as the Constitutional Reform Commission reports and the recommendations to the public of the region every single Saturday into the future. Because the people of the region need to know what Barbados is doing, because we have always led the region with regard to professional conduct. And we intend to maintain that. But when you have the door left wide open, that the emergency powers that brought biological weapons into this country in violation of the International Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical Weapons Treaty of 1976, which this country signed and ratified, in addition to the criminal fraud of the World Health Organization and scientific fraud of the COVID-19 pandemic, what do we expect to happen in the future? That is what we need to know. Because I want to make one thing very clear, very, very clear. The people of this country and Barbadians in the diaspora are not going down that road again. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Norma Springer, ordinary citizen. First, I lend my voice on the quality of the report. Good in some parts, quite wishy-washy in others. And frankly, I'm embarrassed because we boast of being the newest republic, but we have produced an antiquated new constitution. And with all due respect to the composition of the commission, I see a lot of antiquated colonial thinking on the commission. The academy's been absent. The youth, excusing the gentleman who's over in Trinidad, has been absent. There is no innovative, creative thinking in this constitution. I am embarrassed. I just highlight a few things that are absent, or you refuse to touch. You know, it reads like a report that was due the night before. And we all went to school, and we all know when we scrambled to put together a report. The intellectual depth is absent. Capital punishment. Our Constitution in the 21st century chooses to remain silent. Pass it on. This is perhaps controversial, and maybe you had too many religious people on the commission, but the right to die. As much as there is a right to life, there is now the right to die. And this is something we should be examining as a brandest, newest republic in the 21st century. In the last two elections, it has shown with the absence of an official opposition, it meant that the voice of the people should be heard. The voice of the people needs to be stronger. And if we are talking democracy, transparency, accountability, and all the fancy terms that float around, then our modern 21st century Constitution should address these matters. And I look at section 15.3, People's Initiative, dismissed. Oh, we have not addressed the issue of petitions. People of Barbados are petitioning every day. Every day there is something dropping into your inbox. And what is the point of signing these petitions when there is no process that forces state institutions, whether it's parliament or otherwise, to address them? People's initiatives. We need citizen committees on every law, act, whatever is being decided. Because when I look at the committees and their terms of references, it is the same old has-been minds. The old boys club, the old girls club, the former minister getting a pick, and we can go on and on. We know, we see it. You sit in there and see it for yourselves. So we can no longer just have the same minds circulating and circulating. We need the new brains. We put millions of dollars into education, and we are not seeing the results. They're not active. Those minds are not participating in changing and developing and constituting the new society that we require. So I will pause there and not take any more time, but there's lots more to be said. I'm sure other people will speak to some of the other issues. Thank you.
Yes.
I would like to say, I would like to respond to a particular issue. But if you're making a generalized speech, I don't know what exactly I'm supposed to respond to. If there's a query that we can address, we will seek to address it. But it is a matter of opinion, whether it's wishy-washy or otherwise. I can assure you that every determination was taken and give full consideration, and merely a disagreement with the matter doesn't render it of the view that you may hold. Well, may I hear another speaker, please?
Just 1 minute. Just.
Can comment.
Yes.
So I present a comment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the comment, and thank you for the passion. I think these are matters that we need to reflect on, but I want to thank you for your contribution. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say before we have the next questions or comments, that if you go to the CRC's website, yes, you will find the Barbados Constitution. You will find this proposed constitution, because it's not the constitution yet, and you'll also find a report of the commission. In addition to that, for those of you who have not yet been on the website, you'll also find all of the submissions that were made to the commission, and they are packaged in an easily accessible manner. So if you want to look to see what the public requested or asked the commission to consider in relation to the parliament, that is there. What the public ask in relation to defense and security, etc., the Public Accounts Committee, etc., all of that is there. So I would invite you to please go on the website for those of you who are having difficulty finding the Barbados Constitution. It is there for you, and you can just Google Barbados Constitution and you'll find it on many sites, including International ID. But it is very conveniently placed on the website of the CRC. Okay? Yes? Okay.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity to ask a question and make a comment. The question I want to ask, because I haven't had the pleasure yet to review the proposed constitution, but I know from the last constitution that it was said that political parties are not represented in the House of Parliament. Sorry, my name is Reverend Buddy Laria, and I know that from experience that political parties are not represented in the House of Parliament. Has there been a change in this constitution, or is it still the same? That's the question.
There's a recommendation on it.
As the law currently stands, there's no representation of political parties per se in the House of Assembly. People are elected as a grouping, and then that political party determines it, but the individuals are elected on a party ticket. Essentially, that is what it is. But there's nobody goes in and says this is their, well, there are yes and no in a way, Mr. Laria.
Well, I don't like the yes and no. I want a yes or no, not both. I ask if that, in other words, when the election comes, when it comes, and I go into the ballot box, will I see the same as it is now, or will I see BLP, DLP, NDP, or some other party that I am putting my X for? That's what I want to find out.
The Barbados Representation of the People Act does not provide for any electoral symbols against any nomination. The Constitutional Reform Commission did not inquire into matters relating to Parliament. It may be that the PRC recommends it. I possibly don't think so. But currently, all you see on a ballot paper in Barbados are names of individuals, and nothing indicates which party they represent. That's the current law of Barbados.
Okay, so what I'm getting from you is that nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed in that regard.
Right. This is very disappointing to me because in 1991, I was in Barbados on holiday and there was election. And I took the opportunity to position myself to vote for the first time. And I was not able to vote because through ignorance, when I got into the ballot box, I didn't know who represent which party. Simple. Because I was just coming from England. And in England, when you go into a ballot box, you see the name of the person, the party they represent, and the person's address. That's in England. Mother England, this is Little England. As you said, when you go into the ballot box, you see the person's name and their profession, not just the person's name, and their profession. And in 1991, I said, this cannot be right. And I went back to England. And in 1992, I launched what is called the Society for the Resettlement of Caribbean Nationals. So that's the group I represent today. And we have, starting from this month, the regathering, calling home all Barbadians to take part in the process of helping Barbados go forward. I want to ask another question. How do you feel people coming from England and want to vote, and when they go in the ballot paper, when they go in the ballot box, on the ballot paper, there's no political party. But we have been asked to vote for a political party. I would suggest that this be changed urgently, because you cannot continue, and I agree with my colleague, learned colleague, Mr. Fred Corbin, and this is why I agree with him. Because in 1989, I found out in England that there was a program in place to depopulate the world by 2 billion people. And I brought it to the attention of world leaders, and in particular, the government of Barbados. Why the government of Barbados? Because it was the government of Barbados in 1661 that passed a law that said that black people were not full human beings. That's why all of us in here that are black, or parents or foreparents live in chattel houses. I am making an appeal. I'm going back to England this week. And I'm making an appeal here now to you, and I will be doing this in England, to alert the Barbadians, not only in England, but across the world, that what is happening here is basically a sham. If you don't address that fundamental point, because Barbados is who started this can't even find words to put into context. Barbados must now reverse what we started in 1661. If we are going to prepare our people for the 400th anniversary of Barbados colonial experience, which will take place in the next 3 years, in 2027. There are 2 years now. So let us, you totally agree with Mr. Fred Corbin. Let us get it right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm just going to, just one moment. We have a number of questions coming in from online. I just want to read one of them, and then I will come directly to you. Thank you for your patience. And thank you, Mr. Laria, for your contribution on, I think, the electoral process in Barbados, which tends to be handled more legislatively than constitutionally. But we can always circle back to that discussion later. Okay, so as I said, we have a number of questions here, and the one I'm going to read, there are two. One I think can be dispensed with very quickly, and the chair is going to respond to that. And it's coming from Isadora Barrow, and she says, is there a timeline for the draft bill to be brought to Parliament for consideration? Senators and parliamentarians, and senators are parliamentarians, and by that I guess she means the elected members. But in any case, a question says, are senators and parliamentarians required to make themselves accessible to the public for lobbying? Any one of the members, the two commissioners on the head table, as well as the chair, can respond to that question. And the second question that I would like to read here is coming from Andrew Shaw. The draft bill, and he says, the draft bill limits the extension of citizenship to grandchildren to those born after commencement of the new constitution. Was this intentional, and can you comment on the reasoning behind this? I think the chair is going to take this question, and as I said, any one of the three commissioners at the head table will take the first one, which I read from Isadora Barrow.
The matter of the timeline for bill is largely in the hands of Cabinet. It's for Cabinet to decide when they will bring the bill to Parliament. And after it gets to Parliament, then it'll be a matter of the rules of Parliament as to debating what form and process it takes. The question, are MPs and senators required to make themselves available to the public to be lobbied? There is no constitutional law in Barbados to require that. You will have to use the ordinary means of contacting your MP, either through their constituency offices, or go to the House on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Friday or whenever they're meeting, and get hold of them and let them know you have a view you want to communicate and what you wish to see in the matter. But the whole timeline issue is really very much in the hands of the executive of when they will bring the matter to Parliament for consideration. The other question in relation to the Mr. Shaw's question on citizenship, I think that issue was, I will say, was deliberate. No, sorry about that. The citizenship issue, in terms of limiting it to the first generation after, was a deliberate one, in that we felt that it was really an extension of what had been happened before, and that was largely to benefit people in the diaspora. There may be we're trying to keep messages in terms of the songs. Okay, fix. To get the WhatsApp, but then I forgot to fix the other part of the phone. That we will limit it to only the first generation people in the diaspora. We thought it would then essentially leave it to a matter to see how it works out before we open up what one might call the floodgates. But, so yes, it was deliberate intention not to make it wider than it currently has been provided for. If there's a representation that should be wider than that, then we probably should say so, but that's where we went to at this time. Mr. Peasley, you want to ask a question? Get the mic, please.
Hold on.
Somebody else? Yes. Yeah, first. Okay, sorry, Verla.
Good evening. Thank you to the commissioners. I commend you for your work. My name is Peter Thompson. I'm a Bajan. In 2018, Barbados had its most important constitutional crisis of the modern era with the 30-0 result in the election. A constitutional crisis important enough that it necessitated the government that was formed to alter the constitution to accommodate reality. However, this is woefully insufficient because, of course, a 30-0 result in a first-past-the-post electoral system basically disenfranchised 27% of the population in 2018 and 30% of the population in 2022. Now, don't get me wrong, I voted BLP, but I'm not a yard fowl. I understand that it is fundamentally alienating to the democratic process to have such a biased and unrepresentative result. So I poured through your report. I poured through all the submissions. I note that there was, or at least I could not find a single submission from anyone that recommended retaining the first-past-the-post electoral system. Not one. There were several suggestions on improving it. And yet, you accepted none of them. In your report, you pointed to the simplicity of the first-past-the-post electoral system. Simplicity. We are not simple-minded. We are not more stupid than New Zealanders. We are not more stupid than all the other people around the world who have abandoned the first-past-the-post system because of its proven deficiencies. The first-past-the-post electoral system originated in the Westminster system in the UK, and of course, you are all learned folk, and so you are aware of the history of, rotten boroughs and all the other very well historically established deficiencies of this system. And yet, it was in Barbados where not once, but twice, we had the most ridiculous result of a democratic election in a Westminster system in the history of the entire world. Why is it that you have not listened to the several submissions that recommended moving to a less colonial, more representative system for electoral representation.
You want to respond? Okay. There's a little murmuring on my side. It was very contentious at the level of the commission. There were some who were not predisposed to change. There were some who were, supportive of. A little murmuring on the side said, I agree with him entirely, so I leave it there.
Good night to the commission.
Can we get
Mr. Pisa?
who? Yes, Ms. DePisa, please.
Good evening, everyone. Verla DePisa, and tonight I wear only that hat, no other. I'm grateful to have come after Peter because he saves me from raising one of my queries. I have two others. I will say that I share his concern. Not necessarily in the same light, but because I thought that the exercise that we were going through was with the intention of moving ourselves away from our colonial past and striking out on our own. So we were going to look for the thing that worked best for Barbados, never mind what other people were doing, but not ignoring the examples. And so, just carrying on the theme raised by Peter, I want to look at two others. One is the president, and the other is the term life of Parliament. Now, there are several models of presidency in the world, ranging from Russia and Putin and North Korea to France, to Trinidad, and I don't know, I came late and I do apologize for that, but I was in time to hear the commissioner speak to fleshing out positions that you have in your report. And I would want to know how well or how deeply you analyze the various types of presidency to land upon a mere figurehead. We just got rid of a figurehead, and I have to register my disappointment that we're remaining with another figurehead for president instead of carving out a function that is meaningful for our president outside of being, as you put it, a unifying force. Because if the president is not voted for, I'm not certain how they become a unifying force. As it stays right now, and according to your report, it will continue to be a political appointment, whether we want to call it that or not. And I was hoping that I don't have a problem with the president being political, but if the president is going to be political, then please allow the people of Barbados to have a say in who becomes our president and our head of state. That's the first. In terms of the term life of Parliament, the business of running a country is too serious to be arbitrary. And I believe that recent events have proven that to be correct. To have a term, whether it be 4 years, 5 years, I am not in any particular frame of mind as to which one it should be, except that the term life of a president should be longer than the term life of a parliament. But outside of that, I don't have any particular opinion on it. But I'm wondering why, in an exercise that is intended to lean on the people of Barbados and what they want, to have proposals supporting a term life for Parliament being the majority of the submissions received and then rejected by the Commission. I'm hoping that you can flesh out those for me, because it seems as though the people want these changes, but the Commission is not recommending them. And the rationale for that, I would be grateful to hear.
Thank you to the panel. I thank the panel for the opportunity to speak here. I wish to address two particular concerns in this.
Sorry, can you hold, please?
Yourself, please, and we're not seeing you. Can you identify yourself, please?
My name is Fallon Bess.
Colin Bess.
I wish to identify two concerns, particularly Section 8.7 regarding the judiciary and the appointment of judges and discipline of judges. And second, the broadness in the procedure in which public consultations have been done, which opens the opportunity for people to raise their concerns. And that is where this benchmarks to how good governance public consultations are benchmarked to be done internationally according to good governance standards. And I speak today as a son of the soil who was, I would think, educated in some of the best Barbados has to offer at the St. Michael's School, in public sector economics, public sector management, as well as postgraduate education overseas. I'm a graduate of Nelson's alma mater, Greenwich, and I worked as a public sector administrator for three different boroughs, 4 different departments. So I've seen government administration at a high level. And pointing back to these two things, I address the concerns that intersect here or with the judiciary. Is Barbados is a very small state. It is good we have one member of the panel, at least that's not from Barbados. But the judiciary has dealt Barbados an uneven hand. One of the greatest crimes in Barbados is not people popping chains off of somebody's neck, the bandits or one-armed bandits. It's probate fraud. And many people have been complaining about this, the inbrededness of the judiciary. You go to see a judge, and all the judges are we do have some from outside of Barbados. But we know the problem. The judiciary is inbred. It's a small country. The boroughs I work for are 1.7, 2,600,000. That's 8 times and 4 times and several times the size of Barbados. So your discipline judges section just have, the commission recommends that the grounds for triggering a disciplinary proceeding against a judge should be B, misbehavior, no details. The appointment, subsection 8.15, discipline of judges, appointment of judges and discipline of judges. And the process for judicial appointments, subsection 8.10. The process for judicial appointment should be set out in the Supreme Court Judiciary Act. So I would just continue to say that unless Barbados' judiciary, that this committee could have half or more of the majority of judges being from outside of Barbados, Barbados' judiciary will continue to deal the citizens of Barbados what the subsection refers to as misbehavior. It's very short, one word, misbehavior, where judges will refuse to recuse themselves, and judges will simply say, I'm not writing an opinion, and deal you an opinion, which you can go on ChatGPT and it will tell you every code that should never have been given. And Barbados, I've been told, has the highest rate of overturning in this CCJ. So, to close that off, if we don't have more of the judges being appointed from outside of Barbados, probably as broad as Canada, India, the Commonwealth, and we complain to appoint mostly local judges to judge over a very inbred small society, we're going to have Section 8.15, that one word there being misbehavior, being really challenged. To the broadness of public consultations, I've seen consultations for a speed bump and installation of a speed bump in a borough having broader public consultation as much as we've had for this constitutional reform. I probably administered about 50 public consultations. And we do need in Barbados, we can't constitution, it has to be a culture. There's only so much this commission can do. But we do need a culture of governance where there is broader public consultation. And that procedure, per good governance standard, requires that these consultations be summarized, the findings of the consultations be publicized, and when we're going to have consultations, that they be broadly advertised, or else you can stick a consultation in a small little room and said you had a consultation. And I've done many and I've seen many. And there needs to be consultation on a lot more things than this, the Constitution. The Constitution is very important. But we're going to need it to be on tax reform, traffic, the commerce, the economics, development. There are many things that need to be consulted on. But the procedure and the culture in which the governments consecutively do it shows that it remains what we call the colonial culture, where the government comes and says, and it starts even from outside of Barbados, we've made a decision, this is the decision we've made, what do you have to say about it? But the decision is made. That is not a good governance model. So I hope I speak to Barbados, I speak to the powers that be. Democracy was established by blood. Many people don't understand that. It was established by wars, 100-year wars. The democracy we live in, the reality is born out of 100-year wars in Europe, wars against the Vatican, religious wars, Magna Carta, which has afforded us now a right to say, well, when we go into court, I have the right to know what I'm accused of. I have the right to an independent judiciary. If this judge is my brother's friend, or the other plaintiff's friend, or the other, should you recuse, and you don't recuse yourself, where are my constitutional rights? But now we have a charter. And there wasn't broad public consultation on the charter in Barbados. As I said, I've seen broader public consultation for a speed bump. And when you have broad public consultation, it means that people can come and maybe make presentations and make recommendations that will benefit the community and may make policymakers think a way that they did not previously think, find the solutions, because everybody knows the problems, but they want the solutions. And there are people out there with the solutions. The public have the solutions, but the reason and the process of the public consultations must allow that to happen. And my concern is it's not happening. The lady's concern presented earlier, her concern, it didn't happen. I had a bank account with the Bank of Scotland for approximately almost 20 years. And within 2 months of King Charles leaving Barbados, I received a letter that they have made a business decision not to do business with Barbados anymore. You have 3 months to make other arrangements for your finances with us. The world has been ruled by the scepter of powers, and this constitution is a big shift, because a charter, as we were temporarily on, has less rights than a constitution. Thank you.
If I may, just in response to Mr. Pisa speaking in her capacity as Mr. Pisa only, what we try to do in our deliberations is, where possible, to reach consensus. And where it wasn't possible, you'll see the report would simply say that the commission agreed. There are lots of areas where we did not reach consensus. But the report obviously does not say, well, Commissioner Brathwaite or Commissioner X did not agree because we didn't want to go that direction. But what we did do is invite commissioners really felt strongly about any area to feel free to write a dissenting position. With respect to the issue of the president, for example, you would see that there's a dissenting opinion from my friend and our colleague, Gregory Nichols. I remember Gregory was very passionate about the fact that he felt that the highest office holder in this country, why would you leave it to someone else other than the people to make such a choice and stuff? And it's an area that I believe that if the people feel very strongly about it, then that in fact that the door is not closed. As, you know, we would have made a recommendation based on a majority position, but it does not mean that our position is a position that will be adopted by the government. And that's why the chair in his opening remarks said that we want to encourage continued dialogue and we want to encourage the populace where possible to in fact that there is still time where they feel strong about any area to contact your parliamentary representative to speak to the government. You have Sandra there, for example, don't let her leave without you bending her ear. Mr. Thompson, is it? And stuff, because I listen to you, for example. And certainly if you have a system that we end up where we ended up on 2 occasions, notwithstanding the fact that a large majority of the populace would have voted for another party. It's not an ideal system. But what we didn't hear was a position articulated in such a way that it swayed the majority of the members. But it does not stop me from agreeing with you. It does not stop me from agreeing with you at all. We shouldn't have a system where we ended up without any kind of an opposition party, notwithstanding the fact that a certain percentage of the people would have voted, for whichever party it is, etc. I remember taking that position and being accused in one forum of trying to find a solution for the DLP, but it's not a DLP issue. It's a Barbados issue in terms of what we believe should be in our best interest as a country going forward. The issue of fixed election days, I think you raised that. That's also Mr. Pisa, right? Again, it's one of these issues that we spent lots of time on, going to and fro, etc. Eventually, the majority of persons felt that given our history post our first free and fair election, that's whatever day it was, Chair, you would remember, that in fact, that at the end of the day, that when the people of Barbados are ready to vote you out, it doesn't matter if you have a fixed date or otherwise, or if you go on for 5 years and 3 months or whatever, our history is such that people will vote how they decide. Again, I don't believe that's one of the areas where we had a consensus. There were lots of deliberations around it in terms of to and fro, and the majority of the commission took a position, and that's why it's reflected in the report. But it doesn't mean that an alternative view of having a fixed election date, will not be entertained. Similarly, for example, now that I have the floor, the whole issue of having non-resident Barbadians voting, right? We discussed that at length. But even in the diaspora, when we discussed it with diaspora, they agreed that in fact that it needed further research and input, not only in the UK, but I believe in North America. It was said, look, we want to vote. However, we need some time to work out how do we get this done, etc. We did not believe as a commission that in fact that we had enough information available to us to make the recommendation, because it certainly will take a bit more than the fact that Barbadians outside of Barbados would want to vote, because we should have an idea in terms of how many Barbadians are we talking about? Where do they reside? Does it mean that the one person who lives in Sydney, Australia, that in fact that he should have the right to vote as much as the chap who lives in New York or Miami, etc. So we actually looked at what happens in some countries, but it's not as easy as say, let us recommend that Barbadians, wherever they are, be allowed to vote without understanding the implications for it and without doing the necessary research, etc. We didn't close the door to it. We felt that in fact that we did not have enough information available to us for us to make a definitive decision on it. So I just thought I'll make those couple of comments. But if I didn't answer any of your questions, it's because I'm getting old and forgetful. So you may just want to remind me so that we can answer you. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Braffett. We actually had a question from the online audience asking about whether or not the new constitution admit provisions for overseas voting. So I'm happy that you answered it. And you answered really in a very expansive manner, indicating the kinds of concerns and considerations that the Commission gave to the question of overseas voting. And I would have to agree, there was a lot of discussion around that and the possibility of perhaps permitting Barbadians to vote and organizing something in North America, but that might have in fact meant that people, for instance, as far away as Australia having to travel to North America and all of the other issues, procedural and other issues associated with that. Plus, of course, you'll have to be mindful of the Representation of People's Act and what it says about voting and the extent to which the Elections and Boundaries Commission is in a position to handle those matters. But there are some, the questions are coming fast and furious from online, and I would just like to read a couple of them, and hopefully the commissioners at the head table or even the commissioners in the audience might be willing to respond to them. But one of the questions that came up, in fact, two of them, so I'll just read one because they're more or less the same, coming from Camp Ha, I think, that says, I'm trying to understand the purpose, I guess the purpose of this exercise, trying to understand the end result. How will citizens' opinions, and this is the question, how will citizens' opinions here impact and be included in the final product? I guess the final product, by that meaning the final constitution. And the associated question to that is, what will happen to the comments and suggestions being made at this meeting? There are a couple of questions on data protection, and I would also like to read these, and hopefully we'll get a response from the commissioners present. One of the questions is, what protection does the new constitution provide for Barbadians' private data? And there's a second part of the question. Does the proposed constitution say where Barbados is to hold secure Barbadians' public-private data? So I think the chair can answer the question on what will happen given the concerns that you have expressed here. I think you have attempted to answer that question already at the beginning of the session, but it would not hurt if he again responds to that, and then we'll ask anybody else to chip in.
When the cyber crime data bill becomes law, it will then be some, or whatever its manifestations, is always going to be subject to the constitutional check. So if there's a concern, then it has to be probably litigated and for a judge to rule on the matter. I will not presume to say what the outcome will be, but the point is that the Constitution guarantees freedom of protection for expression of opinions and also for that of privacy. And to the extent that someone has a concern, then they can have those rights vindicated in the courts. At the end of the day, whatever constitution we live under is the Supreme Court law of the land, and any act passed by Parliament has to be subject to conformity with that constitution. Yes, Mr. Knox.
Mr. Knox, before, I know you're my senior, but give me 1 sec. Just one other comment, which is as follows. I asked myself, why are we reporting after we've submitted a report? But but my interpretation of the government's thinking is that, in fact, that the door is not closed. In other words, the government still wants to hear from the people in terms of having seen the recommendations made by the Commission. What do you think about it? And the best way to do that is by having us come to report, and thus awakening in you and the general populace our rekindled interest in terms of the process. So if nothing else comes out of tonight, is that someone like Nikita will write something next week in the Nation newspaper about our meeting. If he doesn't, I'll call him and remind him. And ask people to continue being engaged. That's one of the things that the chair said at the beginning. That in fact, that the issue of constitutional reform should not be something that happens every 5 years or 10 years, etc. That we need our people to be more conscious in terms of how do we get things moving, how do we get initiatives done to improve our processes. So my friend at the back, whose name I don't remember, who felt that in fact that we didn't spend enough time deliberating on these issues, I assure you that we spent hours upon hours and days upon days deliberating on all these issues. But that notwithstanding, the 10 of us don't assume or did not assume that we had all the answers. And in fact, one of the fights that we had continuously is that I would say, or some of us would say, is really not for the Commission to craft the Constitution. Is to hear from the people of Barbados and make the recommendations based on the feedback that we have received. And that's why, in terms of the report, that you find that the report is filled with the written submissions, but obviously you would not know the oral submissions that we had on the various meetings that we had with the stakeholders, etc. But that's what shaped how we end up with a document that we have. And we will admit that it isn't perfect. In fact, the chair said it, and Cynthia, who's next to me, said it earlier, that it will need some tweaking. These are just our recommendations. It will need some tweaking. And we probably haven't gotten it right. But with your aid and with interventions like yours, Mr. Thompson, and etc., that hopefully that by the time government sits down, it will be far better than where we are today. And that's why I can only end by saying to you that we want to encourage you indeed to continue the dialogue. Because at the end of the day, this is what's going to guide how we live in this fair land of ours for the next 5, 10 years, or however long.
Data protection. I want to...
Sorry, just on the question of data protection for the person online, there's a data protection that I believe is a 2018 or 2019 piece of legislation. But again, just the overwhelming thing is as follows. Not everything can go into the Constitution. That's why you have legislation. And that's why even in terms of recommendations, you'll find that we would say in certain parts that we believe that this needs to be addressed by statute, because the Constitution cannot respond to everything. Thank you again.
The question of when we should have reported very much concerned the Commission. And the Commission was attracted to what happened in Trinidad when they had a constitutional issue, and that the draft of the Trinidad proposals went to a convention in Trinidad. In fact, they went with 3 bills. And that idea found attraction with us. But we had a stumbling block. And that stumbling block was that our terms of reference, our warrant of appointment, did not enable us to pursue that route. We would have had to have got an amendment, and the amendments that were offered for extensions did not speak to enabling us to have the convention route, which we would have liked to have come and canvass our proposals before we sent it forward as a recommendation. At the end of the day, given the constraints, we handed in our report as we were, warts included. As Mr. Braffett has made clear, there were only some issues that the Commission or Commission members felt sufficiently motivated to write a dissent. In many other cases, the dissent, the lack of, there was not enough emotion to say, I'm going to write a dissent. And so it went through on a nod, as it were. There was not all that solid things that it must be. Let's put it out and move on, because there it is. But some issues were very, very keenly thought of, and some people, well, I'm going to put my head over the rampart and air my view. But so there are commission, and that's why this feedback is essential. How my executive director, Ms. Atkins, crafts her paper to the cabinet and to the line minister should clearly be aided by the transcript of these proceedings, which I am told are being aired elsewhere, and there will be tapes of to pass on. And the honourable member and a minister in the Ministry of Education would be a clear advocate for saying what she came, heard, and saw, you know, so to persuade her colleagues who didn't have the courage to come and keep her company. So, you know, we expect that there will be some recognition of what is being said, and I hope so, in fact.
We almost coming to the end of the sessions, so I recognize, hold on, I recognize 2 persons here. If you could keep it brief, very, very brief, because we have less than 15 minutes left, and I do want to accommodate everyone, so we have 1, 2, 3. Could you keep it very, very, very brief, please? Very, very, very brief, because I still have 2 questions that I would like to read from online. Yes, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 questions.
Okay. John Knox again. 30 love. Justice Blackman said that the validity of the Parliament was before the High Court, and it had been decided by a subject to appeal. At the moment, all of the justices of appeal are appointed subsequent to 2018. It means that they're going to be ruling on whether their own appointments are valid. Does that not raise the issue of the violation of separation of powers? Thank you.
You want to answer quickly? No? Okay, we'll take the second question.
My major concern is about the dissemination of information. Now, this report, we have not been able to obtain copies of the report. I remember that I went to the government printing office many weeks ago, and as soon as I got information that it was going to be available, and I was told that you would have to wait a couple of weeks. No more information has been available as to how to obtain copies of this report. And unless we have this information available for the ordinary people to be able to go and obtain copies, to take the report and study it, and be able to make written recommendations on the report, then we are just wasting time. To download it from the internet is 284 pages or something like that. And consequently, to download it is difficult in many instances. And for people who really don't have that time really to do the downloading, it is very difficult. So something as important as this has to be disseminated to the general population for them to obtain copies to study.
Just very briefly, I understand perfectly well what you were saying in relation to the internet and having to download a document which is well over 300 pages. But there is this document which I expect most people might read as against this one. And you can also find it on the CRC website. It's a pocket guide, the key recommendations of the Constitutional Reform Commission. Yeah, and we did bring along a few copies, but some more I think have been printed. So when they are completed, as well as that report, which it's costly to produce such reports for the entire nation. But certainly they're making every effort to print as many as possible so that these will be distributed as they become available from the printery. Yes?
Hi, good evening. My name is Mervyn Small. What I have to say, it wouldn't go so quickly, but I was watching the night news last night, and I saw the the program on the news that they have to review the Constitution here today at 5 o'clock. So I decided to come. I said I have something to say. So that would I come. I look back at 1966 when the Honorable Prime Minister Al-Bar, because at that time, Majesty Selassie, he visited Barbados in that same year, the 21st of April in 1966. And when I look at the leadership of Al-Bar, I can say that Al-Bar took instruction from him. And one of the things that the Majesty said that I always kept is that he says we must recognize and deal with the attempts being made from all quarters to perpetrate colonial exploitation on the new forms and introduce into our continent a new system no less identical to freedom or liberty. Says independence means more than granting of flag and anthem. And without real and effective freedom in the economics and political phrase, liberty become a mere cat face, devoid of content. And in your haste to escape from one system of bondage, we need not all blindly embrace another, no less oppressive and burdensome to the free spirit of man. That was said by His Majesty. And nobody says so because Barbados, we moved from under leadership of England, and now we're going republic. So I want to ask a question. If we are not going in the direction we are seeing, embracing another form of bondage. And I want you people to recognize Mr. Barra, he took real instruction of what the king has said, and he put the country to this purpose today, he took leadership, and that's what the country is like this today. I want you people to understand and to look at this. I want to say something too. There's something that I recognized in my life when I was working. I'm going to go quickly. It's something I want that you all to put within the Constitution. I was working at a factory many years ago, right? And at this factory, I was working with a group of people that was working 15 years, and they came to work 15 more years. And it come a time when they had to get they're redundant. You see, they're redundant. Person working 30 years.
So I'm sorry, but we are being told, hold on, we are being told that we have to move the voter signs. We're being carried live on CBC. Hold on. What we're going to do is to just simply ask Reverend Rogers to move the voter signs, but when, because CBC needs to cut off. Yeah. And then what we'll do is to continue. Mm-hmm. I will ask you to continue your contribution and then go to Mr. Adam.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right.
Yeah, I'm very sorry about that.
All right, thank you.
So I'm going to ask Reverend to just, but we're not going to end.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the head table, good evening. It is indeed a pleasure to move this vote of thanks for this evening's proceedings, as I believe we've had a quite amicable discussion on all that is obtained within, well, much of what is obtained within the draft report. I must admit that it was with a tinge of trepidation on my part that I came concerning this task, because even if it only was due to the cognizance of the words of the late Abraham Lincoln, the President of the US, who said, "We the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the court, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution." I am delighted that at least we've sat here this evening, and I don't think my colleagues...
You've been watching and listening to the Constitutional Reform Commission's public meeting here at the Frank Collymore Hall in our nation's historic capital city of Bridgetown. We learned more of the contents of the report and the findings of the Commission after its 2 years of public consultation. It is in our best interest to keep ourselves informed on discussions surrounding the proposed changes to our governance, our rights, and our national identity. For our audience on the social media pages of the Government Information Service and the CBC, those of you who will leave us here, we thank you for your time and wish you a peaceful and productive week ahead. For those of you following us on CBC TV 8, please stay tuned for CBC Newsnight at 7 p.m. I'm Rashid Best.